Hi, I'm Dr. Sam Hazledine, founder of MedWorld. Today, I'm interviewing Dr. Rolf Gomes. Now, Rolf is the 2021 Queensland nominee for Australian of the Year. And very interestingly, he's the founder of Heart of Australia, which is a service that brings specialists to rural communities using clinics on wheels. As a result of the work of Heart of Australia, more than 10,000 patients have been seen on their 8,000 kilometre monthly visits. And I understand that it's now servicing 22 bush communities throughout southwest and central Queensland. Heart of Australia has saved the lives of over 400 rural Australians by diagnosing previously undetected critical cardiac conditions. Now, I'm really looking forward to finding out what drives Rolf, what prompted this innovation, and also, Rolf, how you take care of yourself while doing so much. So, welcome.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to be here.
It's fantastic to have you here. Let's start at the very beginning. Tell us how Australia became your home.
Well, my parents immigrated from Calcutta when I was 9 years old. We landed in Melbourne and grew up initially in East St Kilda, which back in 1983 was a different place to what it is now. Relatively rough sort of neighbourhood, and then moved out in the burbs and went to a Catholic school. My parents are Catholic, Roman Catholic, so am I. And didn't find school particularly difficult. As a 9-year-old coming to a new country, it's different to what your parents are experiencing. They're experiencing the sacrifice and hardship, and you're experiencing everything new: television, traffic lights, BMX bikes. So it's pretty easy for a 9-year-old to fit in, but only when you reflect on things later on that you realise the true sacrifice your parents would have gone through.
Yeah, and how would you say, like, coming here from Calcutta at the age of 9, having this, what you recall as a wonderful upbringing, created by your parents' sacrifice, how does this impact, would you say, I guess, your worldview and the way you approach life?
Well, my parents basically left everything to come to a country which offered more opportunity for their children. Yep. That was the primary motivation. And, the words of your parents come back to haunt you. And I remember my father saying that he stepped off a plane with 4 suitcases, 4 children and $200 to come to a country because he thought there'd be so much more opportunity for his children. And he was absolutely right. Later on, when you think about those things and you realise that Australia is just such a fantastic country to give me all the opportunities I've had, the chance of a tertiary education, the chance to go to school, to live in a safe environment, to not get diseases. And, catching a rickshaw to school back when I was an 8-year-old in Calcutta in the monsoon rain and seeing beggars and kids sitting on pieces of planks of wood and carpet riddled with polio, you suddenly realise what a different world you're in and how lucky you are to be here.
No doubt. And in terms of setting up the Heart Bus, do you think that that attitude of just going all in, turning up in Australia with $200 and a few suitcases and 4 kids, do you think that impacted your, that courage? Has some of that rubbed up on you, do you think?
Well, I think one great benefit of not having much is you don't have much to lose either. And, in the early stages when I was talking to people about this idea and, one of the things which would be raised was, well, you've got to be mindful of your professional reputation. And I would turn around and say, well, I'm not sure what reputation you're talking about. I don't really have a reputation as yet. I certainly didn't have any money to lose. And I guess as Janis Joplin said, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Yep. And so I was here and, getting to the end of my cardiology training and really looking to, in a sense, put back into a country which had given me everything and given me a chance of achieving what I had. And I thought about it and I thought, well, I could just be a cardiologist in private practice or public practice, but I'd like to do something which had a much broader social significance to it and something which would, in a professional sense, allow me to contribute to what was less catered towards myself and more to the well-being of the country.
Yeah. I mean, something that really drives me, I guess, in all the business, and particularly through MedWorld, is evolving the status quo. I think as a doctor, as doctors, we're part of what I think it's an amazing profession. And what I want to do is leave it better than I found it. Was that a part of it? Was that a motivator for you, is to evolve and to see, I guess, create opportunity where there wasn't something before?
Yes, and I suppose also having studied engineering before doing medicine, because that was my first professional life as an electrical engineer. A bit of that is instilled in your being. Engineers, they like to make things happen, and certainly being out as a very junior doctor in the regional areas and seeing firsthand the lack of services and wondering, well, how can we bring specialists, not just with their stethoscope, but with their entire toolbox out into these places? And for cardiologists, that's a treadmill and an ultrasound machine, and you certainly can't stick them in your suitcase and hop on a plane. I thought, well, why not the back of a truck? And I suppose that's an engineering sort of mindset where you look at a problem and you try and map out the steps and what options you have in front of you to achieve that. But look, it sounds like a simple idea, and I was 30 years old at the time, and I thought, well, I better get going, because people say you've got a lot of time, but the truth is you haven't got a second to lose, because these things always take longer than you imagine. And from that idea, we took the first step. Mind you, it took 3 years to find the money and to find some like-minded sponsors, and convinced my wife to borrow a lot of money to build the truck. But I certainly wasn't going to die wondering. And like I said, I didn't have that much to lose. I thought, well, if it all fell in a hole, I was young enough to pull myself out of it. I was in a job where at the end of the day, everyone's got a heart. No one's getting younger. I could probably survive the dip. And, we got going, and the rest is history. We started off with 5 towns and 3 specialists, and we were up to 32 towns and 23 specialists.
Fantastic.
About to launch our 5th truck, which will be a CT scanner in the truck. So it's very exciting.
Getting pretty techy. I like that. The engineer in you looked at the problem and thought there's actually a logical solution to this. And something that so often in many industries and often in medicine, I think we get caught up in what we've done in the past rather than what's possible for the future. And I think that, more and more doctors seeing that possibility is what's going to drive us forward and evolve our profession. What do you think?
Absolutely. And, engineers, and I've been an engineer in a past life, we're very much into the how and the what. Unfortunately, we don't get to be in the glory of the why that much in the TED Talks and the social media. But I really appreciate where the sweat and the tears occurs, which is the how and the what. So I knew why we should do it. In fact, at the time in 2011, there was a paper published by the Bureau of Statistics which said if you lived outside major cities, you're 44% more likely to die of heart disease. And I thought, well, in a first world country, that's, we could probably do a bit better than that. But how are we actually going to do it?
Yeah.
And they've been 4 studies and, numerous blue papers and white papers and pillars and pathway documents talking about making healthcare more accessible. But I was sort of, and I was quite happy for people to keep doing the research and the feasibility studies, but I suppose I just wanted to get going and make sure people weren't dying in the meantime. And that was my way I thought we could do it. It's I always think that, medicine's a very traditional profession, and you can understand why that is. You're dealing with human life. You've got to make sure you're not pushing the boundaries too far. But and engineering is a completely different discipline that when you're trying to resist technology, in a sense, resistance is futile because the technology just speaks for itself. I mean, a new mobile phone's better than an old mobile phone, and you can't defend the position. So, you've got different cultures and different professions, and trying to just, step out of the traditional mindset into a more innovative mindset can be difficult. People, I think, have an over-reliance on data. Data, I think, has a role, and it's very useful, don't get me wrong, but, you hear sayings that, things which sound very profound, like without the data, all you have is an opinion. And the truth is, data's got no relevance on imagination, and having a good imagination and creativity has very little to do with data. It's something which I don't think people appreciate. Data can tell you where you've been and provide some guidance as where to go. But, having imagination and the courage to follow it is also very beneficial.
I think that's so interesting. And I know that, one of the sort of a problem-solving technique is pretend you're someone else and come at it from their perspective. Like, through MedWorld, we're building technology. So for doctors. And so it's only in the last couple of years that I've really started to learn about technology and how it's built. And rather than, planning everything to the nth degree, taking an agile approach, and essentially you've got an idea of where you're going, but you're working in 2-week sprints essentially. And it's almost the opposite of the certainty that we often want to have in medicine. But the problem with wanting that certainty is that it can paralyze us as well. And I read a study recently essentially saying that 50% of published studies, only 50% of published studies are actually reproducible, which means that, we're relying on data, half of which is right, half of which is wrong. And so in some instances, there's a place for just starting. We don't need another study. It's just actually kick into it. And learn as you go, I guess.
That's right. And I think sometimes people ask me, how did you know what to do? And you get the sense that they think you knew what to do every step of the way to bring you to this point in time. And really, it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other. And as I say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. You sort of sit down and you look at where you want to go and the options in front of you, option A, B, and C. You have some sense of the upside and the downside, and then you make a decision. And the more you do that, the more you realize that a lot of the problems you don't even know what they are until you get going. But having the courage to do that, having, what appears casual on the surface is actually quite sophisticated. The more times you do it, because you're innately applying the same principles to your decision making without realizing it. And you sort of learn along the way. But look, I suppose different people have different appetites for risk. I have a fairly high appetite for risk, obviously. It's not for everyone. But, so far it's worked for me.
Something I'd be really interested to understand from you, you talk about your appetite for risk. And I was talking to a surgeon the other day about how, increasingly subspecialized they're becoming and how increasingly unwilling that they are to take risks. How do you, I guess, weigh up, when evidence-based, double-blind, randomized, controlled is the way to go, and where's the place to take a risk? Where's the place to, trust your intuition and innovate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I suppose to some extent it's having a sense of what the upside and the downside is. If you're asking someone else to take a risk, having an appreciation that risk is perceived in very different ways by different people. Medicine is not an exact science. So I think people coming into medicine should realise that you get 1,000 people come to you as a cardiologist and say, look, I've had previous heart condition, am I safe to walk the Kokoda Trail? You might put them through the same rigour you do all the time, practising every bit of evidence and all the tests you're doing have a sensitivity and specificity attached to it, which means you're not in an exact science. There'll be a few which you miss. Yeah. But, in medicine, you obviously have to know your evidence. You have to not cut corners and, practice in an ethical framework. And that's about the best you can do. In business, similarly, there's always a few variables which you can't account for. Right now, we're dealing with COVID. That's placing some undue strain on all businesses. But I think, again, if you apply the same principles, that having a good idea of if you're heading down a path, what the potential downside might be, how would you manage that? Would it bring the whole house of cards down? If not, maybe if it did, then maybe you shouldn't, or think carefully about it. You don't really need to be able to predict all the problems which lie ahead, but you need to have a framework for dealing with them. Years ago when I was in a council bringing the service to a new town, one of the councillors said, "How do you know you're going to be here in 3 years?" And for the council to want to support you. And I said, well, look, how would you know that you're going to be married to the same person you do the day you're standing at the altar? You've made an assessment with what you've got in front of you, and you're moving ahead in good faith. And that's about all you can have to go by. Yeah.
Absolutely. A mentor of mine in business, essentially had a decision-making framework, which is, what's the upside, what's the downside, and can I live with the downside? And that's about it. And that's about, it's just a good 3 questions to ask. And I think that it's probably a really useful one for doctors to ask. If we want to innovate, if we want to evolve, when the consequences are really high, we tend to become more risk averse. In medicine, the consequences are as high as they come. It's life and death. In other areas like software development, for example, worst case scenario, your app crashes. You can live with that. And so we start to but we probably start to overcompensate at some times, where we start to apply the same thinking that we would to, are we going to prescribe this medication, i.e. double-blind, randomized, multiple trials, to how am I going to evolve what I do, how I practice, the environment within which we practice.
That's right. And sometimes when you're trying to achieve a large objective, you've got to get the doctors out of the room because of the exact reason which you've said. A good example is, years ago, I was working in a very large public hospital, which had a fantastic intensive care unit, had a fantastic cardiology unit, but didn't have cardiac surgery. And that for years they'd been trying to liaise with the sister hospital to bring cardiac surgery into it. And we had this meeting, and the head said, "Well, we're at a point where everyone's in agreement that we should have cardiac surgery at this hospital." And I put up my hand and I said, "Well, that's great. Can I ask, are we employing a consulting firm, a KPMG or a Pricewaterhouse or an Anderson Consulting? Who's driving the project?" And they said, "Oh, Rolf, that's the most ridiculous thing. You'll spend half your time explaining to an accountant the ins and outs of cardiac surgery." And coming from, I used to work previously in the petrochemical industry. You appreciate all the different things which have to happen for a project to be successful. Not everything has to do with how to do cardiac surgery.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's the mindset that you've got to know where to reach out into other professions and bring those skills into the mix, and bring the best of what they have to offer into what you're trying to do, and then allow you to just focus on what you're good at. But I think sometimes, I see projects trying to get off the ground in the medical sense, and they're too top heavy in the medicine side of things, and ultimately there's going to be a huge dependency on the execution in terms of how successful the whole thing's likely to be.
I mean, if you want to be, you very much learn it in business. Very quickly, you realise you're not good at most things, and play to your strengths and bring in people who are good at others. And it's a really interesting one. Like, the more we can be aware of our own blind spots, the more effective we can actually be. And something I guess I've observed with doctors, and this is not a dig at doctors because the audience is doctors, so but it's just an interesting psychology, and I think when we become aware of our psychology, we can actually work within it. As doctors, we were top at school. We get into the university course; it's the hardest one to get into. We work for 6 years, and then we start as interns. And while we're at the bottom of the rung of doctors, we still think we're at the top of the rung in terms of everyone else in the hospital. And then you go through a very hierarchical medical, from intern to house officer to RMO, registrar, specialist. And so we spend our life becoming increasingly thinking that we're at the top of the pile. And sometimes that means that we think we can assess an investment the same way we could assess someone going through triage, that because we're super capable, in this medical, the surgical or anesthetic, whatever it is, we're super capable in everything. And I think that the more that we can go, we're fantastic at certain areas and open our minds to who else can bring value, the more effective we can be.
Absolutely. And I think, the more opportunities to enrich medicine.
Absolutely.
As well. I was born in Calcutta, and in 2014, Prime Minister Modi announced the eradication of polio in India. And, having seen a lot of these kids and having fairly formed memories of what the devastation a disease like that can cause, I became quite interested in this feat. And so I looked into it, and, the polio vaccine was invented in 1952 by Jonas Salk at the University of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. And I was very curious, given it was such a simple vaccine to administer, why it had taken 62 years to eradicate polio in India. And when you look at how they did it, it was through Rotary and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Indian government. So it was really, we had the very clever doctors to invent the stuff, but in terms of maximising the benefit from a medical sense, we needed people who could sort out the logistics chain. And, if we were relying on doctors to be administrating the vaccine, it never would have been achieved.
Yeah, right. It's team effort.
So it's drawing on the strengths of organisations who are very powerful, who are very good at doing certain things, marketing, mobilisation, campaigning, to to work with the medical profession, to maximise the benefit for humanity.
Yep.
I run a program where we send specialists out in the bush, and to be honest, the medicine's the easiest part of running that organisation.
I bet it is.
The people out there, their heart disease isn't that much different to the ones I see in Brisbane.
Yep.
It's a logistical beast. It's getting people who are very good at running operations in terms of, by default, I run a travel agency through accommodation and flights. It's,
so do I.
It's
recruitment.
That's
what
right.
a job.
So it's very diverse, and the medicine's actually not that different.
Yeah, interesting. 1 second, I'm just going to close my blinds because the sun's come around.
Yeah.
It's just hammering me here. Window seat. There we go.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to you. Now, Rolf, you did. I mean, you said sort of 3 years, and you got a donor and mortgaged your house. I understand it was quite difficult. I mean, you did sort of make it sound quite easy, and often I think entrepreneurs, and you're an entrepreneurial doctor. We sort of forget about the past and we forget about the challenges because we're so focused on the future. Now, I understand it was a difficult 3 years. Has burnout ever affected you? How hard was that for you? And I'm interested to understand what helped you keep going and what helped you manage that.
Look, I think it's just the interest in what I was doing was probably the most sustaining factor. The fact that you're so interested in pursuing something because you believe in the benefit, that the lines between work and fun are blurred. In fact, there's a point where work becomes more fun than fun. And, I feel very fortunate to be living in that world, because I'm not sure many people get a chance to do that, where they enjoy doing something so much that it's not a chore at all to do it. Look, I must admit my parents had an incredible work ethic, so that's always been instilled in me. I'm blessed with reasonable health. I haven't got any significant health issues. I seem to have a lot of energy. I don't expect other people to be like me, even though at times I forget. No, I've never thought I'm at risk of burnout, but I can see how that can happen.
But your purpose was the thing that protected you the most, was it? Like really focusing on why you were doing what you were doing?
I think so, yes. And it's such an interesting world I've stumbled across. There's days I'm talking to multiple patients a day about heart disease. There's days I'm talking to politicians. And with our suite of corporate partners, from the medical technology industry to the transport industry to the oil and gas industry, you're having exposure to all these different worlds which occur outside of medicine. So the diversity is fantastic. And I really like that. I find it very, I look at my diary and I think, great, I'm catching up with so-and-so and I'm quite keen to see what they're doing in their patch, and it's good. And at the end of the day, when you try and work out the benefit you're providing, the benefit we provide, it's so easy to join the dots. I go out there on a weekend, I see 20 patients, and I come back and I think, well, I've sent that guy for an operation and that lady for a pacemaker, and they're very lucky they turned up for their appointment on that truck. And that's extremely rewarding. Around Christmas time especially, I get very sentimental because, I sort of often find myself closing my eyes and just trying to think about all the faces and the conversations of people I've met throughout the year on the truck, and who are perhaps going to be very lucky to be with their families that time of the year. And, that personally, it's very hard to replace that. And I think as doctors, we're in a very privileged profession where we get to experience that human, the entire spectrum of human emotion, and what an impact you can have on people's lives.
Yeah, you say that beautifully. I mean, when I was doing research into, not just burnout, but what helps protect doctors from burnout, and I talked to a lot of doctors, the one thing that they all had in common, everyone had different ways of managing stress and, managing their lives, but the one thing that all the doctors had in common who weren't burned out, who were thriving, was purpose. And the one thing that the burnt out doctors often had in common was that they'd become disconnected from that purpose. And, when you're running an organisation like you are, like Heart of Australia, like when I'm running an organisation like MedWorld, in business, you articulate purpose, you articulate vision, and so it's quite easy to remain attached to it. And what I found with the doctors who were thriving within medicine was that they didn't forget that reason they came into medicine in the first place. They didn't forget that they were there to serve, that they and they did what you did, which I think is a really great tip, is don't just go through the motions and then move on. Like, actually take the time to reflect on the impact that you've had.
That's right. And, try and recap that feeling you had when you were waiting outside to be called in for your medical school interview.
Yeah.
Where was your mind? Where was your heart? You were so excited. You were thinking, I'm going to enter a profession and save people's lives and ease suffering, and this is going to be great. And, you go through med school thinking, it'd be great. This is the subject matter is interesting. The appreciation from the community is fantastic. And I just want to, it'd be just good to be able to, be comfortable in earning a living. But you've got to spend less time talking to your accountant, because the truth is, the more money you have, the more comfortable you can be.
Yeah.
That's just, you go away from being comfortable to saying, well, how comfortable do I want to be? Is it all right to go to Tangalooma or the local beach resort, or do I have to have a ski trip in Whistler every year with the whole family? I mean, at some stage, when is enough, and you need to be able to recognise that as well. So I always think, getting back to what originally spurred you on to be part of this profession, I always say to the doctors who are interested in being part of our program, I said, look, it's really good to just get out there and get away from the white noise and the battle and clear your mind and get back to medicine. And 99.9% of the times, most of the specialists who engage with our program have their own lives, their own practice. But it's just that little bit which is a bit more, has a bit more social significance and community oriented, which I think if you can incorporate that, a little bit of that in your life, whether it's rural service or, at a Rotary club or doing something volunteering for some organisation, bring that into the mix. I think that's actually a very healthy existence. And just accept that sometimes you are too busy and it's okay to say no. I have colleagues who say, oh, look, I'm so busy, but, you can't really say no to the GPs because, they might think you're too busy and stop sending referrals. And the question is, well, are you too busy? And would it matter if they stop sending so many referrals? Work out what you want.
Yeah, careful what you wish for, you might get it.
That's right. So you've got to work out what it is you want, because if you stop seeing the patients, they might think you're too busy and they might stop sending referrals, but you might be better off and happier as a result. Yeah.
Do you create? I mean, I know I can absolutely identify with when life becomes work and work is life and it's fun. What do you do? Do you specifically carve time out away from work for your wife? Do you have children?
Yeah, I've got 3 young children.
And you'll learn like me is that work as life doesn't resonate with them. They need time, don't they? So how do you do that? How do you create that?
Well, firstly, I make sure that the time I have with them is time with them. So,
Yep.
There's things when you have a young family.
Yep.
There's something's got to give.
Yep.
You can't come home and say I'm off on an hour bike ride, there's a little bit of sacrifice you have to make, and just be mindful that when you are there, that you're giving them your full attention. So when your kid comes and shows you a picture they drew,
Be there.
rather than say, "Oh, that's lovely, go show your mother," which really is just not good enough. That you actually engage and in the way they're expecting you to engage.
Yep.
So work out, when you're at home, when you can be at home, can the other stuff wait?
Yes.
Do you have to return this person's call today?
Yep.
Do you have to, can it wait to tomorrow? Do you even have to do it, or can someone else do it?
Yep.
I'll give you an example. When I first started off in medicine, you're on call for the private hospitals, and you'd get a patient. They'd ring you from emergency. They'd been admitted, and they're very stable. And the emergency doctor was happy that they're quite stable. And the question is, do you have to go in that evening, or can you go in the next day? Because if you went in that evening, by the time you got home, your kids would be in bed. So, you know what I mean? In their world, you've been missing for a day.
Yep. Yeah.
So just working out, just balancing the priority.
It's a.
Does this? Yeah.
I was going to say.
So
carry on.
Yeah. See, I often come home, and I try and come home and make sure I'm there for dinner.
Yep.
And when my kids go to bed, I put my tie back on and head out to the hospital and finish my ward round.
Right.
Because when they're asleep, they don't miss me.
Yep.
And if you're having to sort of switch the light on and, meet the patient at 9 o'clock at night, well, that's not ideal either, but it's just you just understand the importance of both scenarios.
Yeah. And I was going to say, it's about getting clear on what's important. Values are what's important, aren't they? And I think as doctors, what you've described is a really elegant way of looking at urgent and important. Like in medicine, everything can seem urgent, which means the important stuff can often get shipped. And again, in burned out doctors, they just get caught up in the urgent often, and the important, their health, time with their children, that sort of thing, that you can always bump important because there's always something blaring at you. And so you've really got to develop a clear way of screening the noise and going, can it wait? And doing that every single day. Like you've got to keep that up, don't you? That's not something you can drop.
That's right. That's right. And you're vigilant that you're not going to get this time back with them again.
Yes.
And so when you're there completely.
Yeah.
You're engaging in them not at a superficial level, but really entering their world. If my daughter's baking something, I might get, so how did you do that? Or, providing some proper feedback. And, the Heart of Australia journey for me, it's been very much a family journey. They come out on the trucks with me and the school holidays. I let them know where I've been. They ask me, so who was the sickest patient you saw today in Cooktown or wherever it is I've been? So they understand that when I come back, I haven't just disappeared for a day or two here and there, and they don't know what's happened.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think children adopt the framework you paint for them to some extent. My dad was a workaholic, but he's so respected by his family because my mother never criticised his absence. In fact, she said you're so lucky to have a father who works so hard to provide for you.
Yep.
We're very lucky to have him. So that's the world, that's the reality, that's the mindset that children adopted. Whereas if you had someone painting it in a different scenario, that's the way kids would think about it later
absolutely.
on.
I think one of the most important things we can do for our kids is show them a world of possibility. And, we all say to our kids, you could be anything, you can do anything. But how often are the kids looking at us parents and going, well, why haven't you then? And, by engaging them, by bringing them, out on the bus and things, you're living your purpose and you're showing them that it's possible to question the status quo, to do things differently and to make a difference and help. And so, that example, I'm sure that will be something that becomes part of the fabric of their lives too.
Yeah, and being able to sort of take their ideas, and whether it's a lemonade stand at the front of the house or, selling eggs or whatever it is, their little entrepreneurial ideas and encourage them.
Yeah.
And because that's where it starts.
Absolutely.
And I think diversity, I've done every job under the sun, from push trolleys to sell stuff door to door to work in a restaurant as a waiter.
Yep.
I think the diversity also is a great benefit later on in life.
No doubt. Rolf, I could talk to you for hours, but I know that the audience is doctors, so we've got to think about their time. Let's finish up with just the last couple of questions. I'd like to know if you could go back to your 18-year-old self, and what would be the three most important things you'd tell them to ensure that they have a good life? What are the three most important things you've learned?
I think the three most important things I've learned from my parents as well, which is honesty and integrity. Yep. And I'd still, I've always tried to live like that. I think I would also say that to not dismiss your ideas as easily, to nurture them, and be mindful who when people comment on your good ideas, that you're trying to sort out fact from conjecture, and really give your ideas a little sanctuary to develop.
I like
that. I'd say, don't wait till you're older to do things. You sometimes think, I'll wait, I'll get to that next year or the year after. If you have an idea, there's a saying, that plant a seed of opportunity every day to try and steer it in the right direction. So, whatever your idea is, even if you sort of think, well, I've got to take some positive action to make it actually happen, whether that's picking up the phone and ringing someone, or, getting a book which tells me how other people have done something similar. But do something proactive to try and realise that dream. I love that. And I suppose what else? Thirdly is just listen to yourself and what you know as a person you enjoy doing. And don't be pressured into something which you're not innately accustomed to. The reason why I say that is, I was good at maths and science in high school, and I drifted into engineering. But when I reflected back on my life later on, there's nothing more I enjoy than chatting to people all day. And I was like that in high school. I was like that in primary school. That's why I enjoyed serving tables at the restaurant, because I chatted to people. I was good at selling stuff door to door because I'd get into a conversation with people. And so when I decided to do medicine, it was actually the decision that I want to be in a job which was relatively intellectually stimulating, but I got to chat to people every day. So really being in tune with what you as a person were like, and not necessarily what people told you should be doing.
Fantastic. Great.
Yeah, so that's that's my
That's
thoughts.
great advice. One final question, and we're a long way from having to, but tell me, how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as someone who had the courage and tried their best. Someone who, didn't really, who tried to follow a moral compass, and was very mindful if that was pointing in the right direction.
Brilliant.
When I started Heart of Australia, until today, I know that it's a good thing for the country. And, that's obviously been shown out by the reception we've received. But, if you really think that what you're trying to do is a good thing, which will benefit people, then you shouldn't really let other people tell you otherwise. I also think that, never confuse intelligence with being sneaky or that, you understand what I'm saying?
Integrity.
Like, yes, your integrity.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's, in all your dealings, that's the currency you're trading in. And, once you've lost that, you've pretty much lost everything. And, with our sponsors, with our partners, with government, I always try and just, maintain that, if I gave you my word, it's probably more valuable than a written contract.
Brilliant. Well, Rolf, I think you're a man, you're a doctor who's definitely living that. You're an example of that courage, and a person who's just willing to put themselves out there, innovate, do your best, and keep your word. And I think that, to me, it's been so interesting talking to you today, and I really, I'm always looking for what's that new distinction, and to me, it's the really one of the big things I got out of today was just how you've applied the sort of, a technologist thinking and engineers thinking within medicine, and how useful it is to apply different things in different situations, and the innovation that can come and the progress that can happen as a result. I really appreciate it. So look, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. All the best with Heart of Australia and continuing the great work you're doing. I know you're building another bus, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. All the best.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.